Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we deepen our exploration of the Mayan calendar, which we've been contemplating over the last number of months, including in our pilgrimage to Teotihuacan in Mexico, which was based on the Mayan calendaric system and astrology and astronomy and cosmology. But before we engage in that exploration, I want to conclude my observations about the Republican National Convention, which finished last night with an hour and 20-minute speech by Donald Trump, the Republican nominee. I was attentive to the Republican convention from Monday night till last night. It lasted for 4 days. All the media outlets commented on how unusually well organized, enthusiastic, articulate the speakers and convention delegates were about why they were there and what the Republican Party now intends to do. President Trump last night spoke about his assassination attempt just a few days ago, not even a week ago. And he had a very large, square, white patch over his right ear, and really spoke about how if he had just moved his head a millimeter or two to the left, that extraordinary enthusiasm. The entire convention was on its feet for the entire 120 minutes that he spoke. It was really extraordinary. He has a devotion that is unparalleled in modern American history, and they are now marching forward to create a landslide in the American electorate. That's what they've left Milwaukee today to do over the next several months. On the other side of the aisle, President Biden has now succumbed to COVID. Apparently, it's a mild case, but he has suspended his various meetings. It's been reported that leading Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, Joaquin Jeffries, and Nancy Pelosi in the House have been quietly, privately advising the president that he needs to step down. His polling numbers are collapsing around the country, particularly in the swing states. So the Democratic Party is as disorganized as the Republicans are organized, and the Democratic Party is being gripped by a malaise, even as the Republicans are gripped by the fervor of the adulation of a leader who was saved by God to save America. The archetypal difference between the two parties at this time cannot be overstated. Trump was strong, he was clear, he was reverential to the divine, he was determined to take this moment of his salvation into the White House and radically change the American polity. And the Democrats metaphorically are suffering from COVID. They're suffering from a flu that is robbing them of their momentum. And what that bodes for the American Republic, as I've indicated before, is an authoritarian administration motivated by revenge, motivated by a radical restructuring to completely close off the borders, and more fundamentally and devastatingly, from day one, said Trump, we're going to drill, baby, drill. So climate change is not on the agenda. The big oil is back with real power and an entire major political party that seems on the threshold of seizing control, doesn't even believe that climate change exists right at the moment when we all know that climate change is spinning out of control. So this does not portend well for the American Republic. We need to be sober-minded about this. We need to pray that President Biden will be able to take the necessary steps to transition, because there is no way in a deteriorating physical and mental condition that he can really continue as president of the United States, much less take on a bulldog like Donald Trump in the debates and in a campaign that will be ferocious in its intent and in its quality. So that's where we've ended up, and that's what we need to bear in mind. And therefore, it is with enhanced focus and concentration that we need to look at something as deeply profound as the Mayan calendar, designed by seers thousands of years ago who understood the true nature of reality, who understood that the cosmos was one, who understood that the interior of the human heart is linked to the vastness of the stars, who understood that alignment with nature opens up the cyclic patterns of time, and that time has calendars within calendars within calendars, like gears in a big wheel. And on that basis, we're able to understand and foretell the future. Because if time is cyclic, and the inner and the outer, and what is above and what is below, are all interrelated, then it's possible to predict the cycles as they unfold, because they're all determined by number and geometric forms. I want to now introduce Carl Kalleman, who holds a PhD in physical biology from the University of Stockholm, who was a senior researcher at the University of Washington School of Public Health, focusing on identifying toxic substances in the human environment, but who, in addition, for the last 35 years, has been studying the Mayan calendar. So Carl will say a few words of introduction, then he will prepare a PowerPoint, and then present a PowerPoint, and then we'll dialogue for the balance of the time. And then he'll join the after chat for a deeper conversation. So thank you, everyone, for joining Humanity Rising. And now I introduce Carl Kalleman on the Mayan calendar. Carl, if you want to turn on your video and Unmute yourself. There we go. So you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jim. That's a wonderful presentation and introduction, you might say, and I will try to get to our current point in time after discussing a little bit, presenting what the Mayan calendar is about. I'm happy to hear that you already have familiarized yourselves, some of you at least, about the Mayan calendar. And as I see it, this is probably the most important information that we can get from ancient times that actually applies to our current time and actually applies to modern science. The science that we're currently taught at universities and schools and so forth should need to undergo a considerable transformation in light of the knowledge that the Maya had. And I will start by presenting my, just a second here. Oops. Okay. So this is the topic of my talk, what the Mayan calendar can tell us about the past and the future. And it's important then to, if we take the Mayan calendar seriously and think that there is some truth to it, which has been my work for 35 years, really, then we will also have to verify that it applies very much to the past, where we can know what happened and can correlate that with the calendar. And so this is what the talk will be about. But as you can see down there, I have given two different dates. One is our Gregorian date that the whole world basically follows today, July 19th, 2024. And the other one is the date in the sacred Mayan 260-day calendar, which gives a daily energy of time. Today it happens to be 7 Lamat, which translates to English to rabbit. And rabbit is a good, people born in the day sign of rabbit, they have good green thumbs, they are proliferate, they are abundant, maybe. And I would say it's kind of auspicious that it's also the sacred number 7, which is always sort of a symbol of balance to the Maya. Anyway, this calendar system that I will be talking about, it originated in the area that's usually referred to as Mesoamerica. And what you see here is a number of peoples in this area that followed the sacred calendar. But the people that developed the most advanced calendar system were the Maya. And because they did not limit themselves to a simple daily calendar, but they also wanted to see how does that fit into the big picture of the cosmos and ourselves. How did energies change over time in our own world? And I'll give you just a couple of pictures to make you feel at home with the environment, so to speak. This is an Olmec god or possibly ruler. And this is the oldest of the high civilizations in this Mesoamerican region. And they actually had some preliminary writing developed in this people. The Maya is not next in order, really, but it's still the one that's most important. Here you see a site, a picture of the temple of the inscriptions in Palenque. And this is one of the most sacred and important pyramids that they built. And the first thing I would like you to notice is that it's built in 9 levels. It's 9 terraces. And this is true for the most important pyramids, whether it's in Tikal, in Chichen Itza, or in Palenque, as this is the case. I've spent probably several weeks inside of this pyramid. The reason being that the inside of the pyramid, there is this sarcophagus and an important sarcophagus lid of a king that ruled Palenque and died in the year 683 in our calendar system. And I was there basically just to absorb the energies and nothing else. But I needed that as some kind of a background to feel my way through the system and make it comprehensible to modern people, I should also like to add. Now, then we do have sources from the Maya. And what you see here is that 4 books, one of them I'm presenting here is the Dresden Codex. And only 4 of them have survived because most of them were burnt by the Spanish bishops a long time ago. But that has, as you can see here, the small little symbols are actually calendrical symbols, and all their books are actually calendars. And it tells us that how important calendars were to them, and also maybe that they looked upon time in a completely different way compared to what we normally think of. And I would say that their calendrical system is quantized. It's a quantum system, in contrast to the more physical astronomical calendars that the rest of the world have been following. And so there is the calendar system then describes the underlying state of the universe, not necessarily the physical objects that we are used to looking at with our eyes and working with. And to get to that, to understand the quantization of the Mayan calendar, we may start by pondering the question of the plumed serpent. That's the highest deity in Mesoamerica, at least in later times. What was once the world's largest pyramid in Cholula, not in the Maya land, but it's south of Mexico City, was dedicated to the plumed serpent. And so was the pyramid in Chichen Itza that I will show you shortly. It was dedicated to the plumed serpent. And I remember when I first came there in 1979, I could not understand what is this about. Why would people dedicate a pyramid to a deity that is like a snake? And it's taken me quite some time to elucidate what it was all about. But you may look at this plumed serpent and also see that there is a deity at the bottom there who holds a handbag. And it symbolizes, I believe, that this deity brings the gifts of life and civilization and the calendars to the human beings. So it's bringing something, and that's what the Popol Vuh is also saying. It's bringing knowledge and the calendar. And so we might then wonder, if everything comes from this plumed serpent, what is it about? Well, here you have it, another version, and you can see that in the Popol Vuh, which is usually referred to as the Bible of the Maya, there the sovereign plumed serpent was the main deity of creation, the one that all the gods went to ask what roles they were going to have in this creation. And but the Maya are not alone with revering the serpent. Actually, you'd be hard-pressed to find any culture that didn't revere a serpent. And here you see a couple of pictures. To the far left, you have what is believed to be the oldest piece of art on our planet. From Botswana in southern Africa, you see a sculpted serpent. And then you see from the Ice Age a bunch of serpents, and then 10,000 years from the site called Nevali Kori in present-day Turkey, right by Göbekli Tepe, where you see that there is a serpent on the head. And what I interpret this to mean is that there are waves coming in, influencing our mind. The serpent brings a mind simply to the human beings. And that, if you have that, you can start to make sense of why they talked about this as a deity, a creative deity. And here you come to Chichen Itza, and here you have the real plumed serpent. And it's again a pyramid in 9 stories. It's currently considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. And but these 9 terraces each represents a level. It actually represents a particular wave, or as you can see from the diagonal staircase, you can see there are 7 triangles of light going down into the head of the plumed serpent at the bottom. And at the top of the house, on top of the pyramid, there is a little house that is believed to be the center of the universe. And in other words, from the center of the universe emanated 9 different waves in 7 steps like this, 7 light pulses alternating with 6 triangles of darkness. And this is really the essence of the Mayan calendar system. What of course will be important for us is to see how does that apply. What can we draw conclusions regarding the Republican convention or whatever, I would say. But let's, this is an important start. This is actually a light show that only happens on the equinoxes, and it lasts only 20 minutes. So it's not that it's always there, but the pyramid has been built in order to produce this kind of a light show of 7 triangles on light formed as the scales of the plumed serpent. Now, this then is a wave. This is a wave, so to speak, and what you see here is the same wave, basically, with 7 pulses of light, days, as I call them here. You could call them peaks as well, and alternating with the downturns, which are the valleys. And this is really the plumed serpent, but it's really then at the same time, if you would like to use a more modern word rather than a mythological word, I would say it's a macrocosmic quantum wave. And time passes, it develops a evolutionary process, starting with the god of procreation and ending with the god of creation, you might say. Or you could say it's a process from seed to mature fruit, with every peak bringing a new step forward, so to speak. So remember what I said. The plumed serpent, according to them, brings the civilization, the calendar, the numbers, etc., etc. You may also see that the the valleys here, usually the deities are not as creative or positive as you could see in the peaks. It's god of death, god of darkness, and so forth. So this became the basis of a prophetic art among the Mesoamerican peoples, where every time period was associated with a quality. We would say an energy today, probably, and they would say it's a god or goddess that did it. That's just, you can debate which one it is. But certainly what this is the basis of the prophetic art of the ancient Mesoamericans, and in particular among the Maya. And then what we also know from the Maya inscriptions is that there are 9 waves like this, like the pyramids is built like in 9 steps. And actually then each level represents a certain wave, and every wave brings a certain aspect of life or a certain aspect of consciousness into existence. And here you can see the 9 waves, and you can have the Maya names of them. You can see the wavelengths. So the wavelength of the bottom level here that I won't go into detail about is 2.5 billion years long. But then it's with every new wave, every higher step, so there is a 20-fold increased frequency of the waves. So it goes up to the 9th wave that has a wavelength of only 36 days. This is an enormous speed up of time, and that is really what you find when you study the evolution of the universe up until the present time. And you may notice that the first one here is actually close to the time of the Big Bang. And what this tells us is that the calendar system then, in principle, covers and explains, you might say, the evolution from the very beginning of the universe, from the first emergence of consciousness, I would say, around the time of the Big Bang, and up until the present time and beyond. And they are added to each other. So, with every new wave added to the lower waves, there will be an increased complexity. And this is basically how the system works. And you can see you have also the activation date of these various waves. And if you look at the higher waves here, the ones, I'm leaving aside the 4 lowest waves because they are about biological evolution. The 5 higher waves instead are about you might say, the spiritual and mental evolution of mankind. And it's the first one that really separates humans from animals is really the 5th wave that started 100,000 years ago. And you can see it's sort of it's a state of consciousness that doesn't have any filters. And then it goes through a sequence of 3 different states of consciousness that have filters. And this is during this is the you might say the urban revolution. The first civilizations comes with the first one of those. The second one is the industrial revolution. The third one is the digital revolution. And on top of this is the wave and the state of consciousness that we should all, if I'm correct here in interpreting the Mayan calendar, that we should all strive for a state of consciousness that doesn't project darkness or filters onto ourselves or others, a state of unity. That's where it's meant to go. So it is this process, you may notice, is from unity through separation and back to unity. And This is basically the same thing I just said here, but it's to describe a little bit about the initial events that each of these various waves have brought. And the first is the universe as such, the Big Bang, you might say. The second one, and some simple cells. The second one is multicellular organisms, or animals, if you like, and as well as plants and fungi. And then comes the primates. You know, sometimes you could hear Mayan say that they enact monkeys because they say that's from a previous creation. And so primates is a previous creation. And the fourth one is the one that really brings the human brain capacity to its fruition. And then that on top of that, we have the various changes in how humans behave. Because you know, how we perceive reality and how we recreate reality depends on what kind of state of consciousness that we have downloaded from the cosmos. And the downloading of these different states of consciousness and connected to the various waves, these downloads is what shapes human history, or actually the history of the entire universe, if you start at the bottom level of the pyramid. So if you start to see this, you know, completely different from the view that you're taught in schools and so forth, the entire evolution of the universe actually follows a kind of a time plan based on the times of activation of these various waves, and the waveforms and the steps in the evolution of any kind of phenomena that this 13-step process outlines. Okay, and just to exemplify then, you know, for instance, the human relationship to the divine, this is just an example. This could, I'll show other examples still. But you can see here that you know, the state of consciousness of the fifth wave, without any structure really, is what created a sort of a shamanistic worldview and shamanistic unity of everything with nature and so forth, because there is no filter on the human consciousness at that state. But then what happens 3115 BC, at the beginning of what the Maya called the long count, then as you can see, there is a geometric structure is being downloaded with a filter that creates a yin-yang polarity of all relationships, and also creates the geometry creates the ability to build cities and pyramids and all those kind of things that people in the previous shamanic state were not able to build. And then it comes the time when the dark filter covers all perception of reality, and that's when the sort of the more atheistic time comes with the Industrial Revolution and the production and consumption and the material values of life. And then, as you may, I'm sure you have noticed over the past 30 years or so, there's been a recurrence of spirituality, a new age or new shamanism or whatever you want to call it. But it has to do with the fact that in this new state of consciousness, the light returns, except on the other hemisphere of the brain compared to previously. And then the end results, and some people may have reached it, but we're all climbing in that. That's really what was the meaning of the shift in 2011 that sort of brought a big change in the calendar system, or how to interpret it. And that's about returning to a sort of state of unity with the divine, as I understand it. Okay, so now let's look a little bit at then, especially at the so-called long count, the one that started 3115 BC, because that's it's about a topic that a lot of people have taken an interest in. Where did civilizations come from, and how were they created? We just saw that prior to that, people were in a much more unity state with nature, but they were not able to build pyramids and stuff like that. So what brought the change about? Basically, then, what was the quantum leap that brought from the fifth to the sixth wave? And you can see here this shift in the states of consciousness on the bottom of this slide. But then, if you go back, if you go back to prior to 100,000 years ago, you really find no symbolic expressions, no artistic expressions of human beings. It is that shift, the fifth wave, that starts to make human beings into creative beings, into that have a mind, that have a symbolic expression, an artistic expression. But how did their art look like in the fifth wave here? Well, here I pointed out a couple of events that we can look on in the very sparse remains of art. You may notice here, however, that the cave paintings that really starts here with a peak. In other words, that was one of the steps in this process that made people create more advanced art. And then here you have an example of this from Altamira in Spain. And you can see it's great art, and it tells us something about their inner world, that they're so connected to the animals that they sort of capture the spirit of the animals. On the other hand, you might say there's no structure, there's no frame, there's no horizontal or vertical lines defining this. So it's sort of floating around. People were in a floating state of consciousness when they were back in this fifth wave at the bottom of the scale there. And they also, this is one of the oldest statuettes on our planet, and it's like Lion Woman. It's from present-day Germany. It was found fairly recently, like 30 years ago or something like that. And as you can see, it is a shamanic view. It's a shaman has merged with a lion. In other words, they didn't structure reality like we do today, or create separations between the lion and the human. Instead, you could go in and out as shamans would do. And you have something similar here from France, from Trois Frères, the sorcerer, a hybrid, a therianthrope, humans with antlers and so forth. Not that structured way of perceiving reality as we have later come to do. And so then this is prior to civilization, you might say, prior to the buildings of the pyramids and cities and so forth. And there are several different explanations to that. One is, the mainstream science really have no explanation. They just observe what happened and what kind of things people were doing. Then there is the idea that it was extraterrestrials that came and taught humans how to create pyramids and so forth. Well, and then there is the idea that at some point there was some high-tech civilization 10,000 years ago, and then suddenly 10,000 years later, people remembered that and created civilizations. And then there is my own theory, which is that a quantum state in consciousness took place. The state of consciousness was completely altered, and with that alteration, a perpendicular geometry became accessible. And this is also a cosmic theory, but it's not about cosmic beings coming down here. It's about a connection to the divine source, rather, which is a cosmic source at the same time. And so what happened then when the sixth wave was activated, what the Mayan called the long count, is that in many parts of the world, and meaning that it happened simultaneously in Mongolia and Peru, people started to build pyramids. Not only in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but then in addition, people started to build these big monuments, like in the British Isles and Stonehenge, Avebury and Newgrange and so forth. So this happened in a very short period of time, and it coincides with the beginning of the Mayan long count, which is probably their most widely used calendar in the inscriptions and so forth. And this is the Mayan long count. Here you can see the various shift points in time. You have the AD and you have before Christ, if you like. So here you have these steps. And you may ask yourself, if we had time, we would go into much more deeply into this, but if something happened at these various shift points, and of course that is my own work is really very much about identifying what happened at these shift points in all the various waves that the Mayan calendar system was brought by. But anyway, so what started it? You know, if this suddenly happened, and people had not built any pyramids prior to this point in time, what happened that must have influenced the entire planet? Well, the Maya have an explanation. They say, and this comes again from this location in Palenque, the Temple of the Inscriptions. On the walls up there, they have the Mayan creation story. And what they describe is that something happened in the cosmos. There is a place called Place of Creation, the center of the Tree of Life, or World Tree. And the first father erected the world tree so that the light could enter. It was made proper, the raised up sky place. The 8-house partitioning is its holy name, the house in the north. And really, what is most important to understand here is probably what 8-house partitioning means, because it seems clear that they refer to something happening in this cosmic raised up sky place, like a new slide being projected from that cosmic center onto the entire universe. And the Tree of Life, it's another one of those that everywhere on the planet you will find people revering it. To the right, you see Chanbalum and Pakal worshipping that almost looks like a Christian cross, the Tree of Life. And you might say the Christian cross is actually modeled upon the Tree of Life. But if I go to my own ancestors among the Vikings, they also had a Tree of Life, which was even more powerful than the gods, because the gods would always gather under this tree in order to get the knowledge from the tree. And something you might want to notice here is that this tree introduces the yin-yang polarity of our planet. Alfheim means the home of the elves. Black Alfheim means the home of the black elves. So they're on both sides of the tree, and it's an interesting thing to study the tree of life in different cultures. The point is they're everywhere. And it's something that exists on several different levels. Every level on the cosmos has its own tree of life, which is basically a perpendicular structure, as you can see here. And then the information that drives the evolution of life it trickles down from the cosmic to the galactic to the solar system to the global and then down to ourselves. And this is how our states of consciousness are being changed, because we are in resonance with that cosmic source and we're entangled in it. And this, I would say, is a holistic model, a holographic universe where everything is connected to everything else. But most importantly, we ourselves are connected to the cosmic source, and that provides us with a basic framework of understanding reality. And at the bottom level of this ladder, you might say, of what we can see, our right brain half is connected with the Eastern Hemisphere, our left brain half with the Western Hemisphere. And this is the way that the quantum field of the planet looks like when there is a peak in the sixth wave that I'm talking about. But anyway, the eighth partitioning, that's what they said. Now, the Maya who built this, they didn't live 5,000 years ago. They lived like 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, more likely. But then the question is, the people that actually lived 5,000 years ago, when this event happened in the cosmos, did they show any signs of this? Well, certainly, if you go to the old kingdom of Egypt, you find that they have these 8 deities, the 4 male-female couples, and they create who they believed at that point in time created order out of chaos. And remember, then I said that the cave painters prior to this civilization, they were in a floating state, and this new state of consciousness that to the Egyptians was brought by this Ogdoad, this gathering of 8 gods. That is what created structure. And I think personally that the Jewish flood myth, because flood myth is the same kind of a thing. You have 4 couples, male-female couples, and notably, why did they build an ark rather than a boat? Well, because you have the structure, you have the rectangular, perpendicular structures on the ark, and you may, coming back to the 8 partitioning, if you go to the Great Pyramid in Giza, the most impressive one in the world, most people would say, it's actually not 4-sided, it's 8-sided, which is exactly what the Mayan inscriptions were talking about. And they were built around the time when the Mayan long count was initiated, when this shift happened in the cosmos. So I believe then that people in Egypt at that time, they downloaded this new state of consciousness, and then enthusiastically, because they felt there was a divine calling behind what they were doing, they started to build something that reflected that cosmic 8 partitioning. And, the symbol for a hieroglyph for a city is 8 partitioning. And then it's all over, this 8 partitioning. Look at it's in China, it's in India, it's in among the Maya, it's among Mesopotamia, it's about the Muslim. It's all the religions, even here, if you make a Celtic cross rather than the traditional Christian cross, they all have this 8 partitioning in them. And that is very much the source of the beginning of civilization. And so, to illustrate how this works, look at this. At the top, you have a picture of what's happening in the cosmos. You have a light and a dark person, and you have an 8-partitioned star. And then you have a serpent going down to a court scene, presumably, where humans are interacting as they do in ways that we may find hard to interpret. But anyway, it's sort of this picture from an old Mesoamerican codex basically demonstrates this whole idea that something happened at the cosmic level. A yin-yang polarity in 8-partitioned was became accessible for downloading, and then you have whatever consequences that has among the human beings down there. And then around that time, you have all this, all the aspects of the main aspects of civilizations actually emerge, plus minus 100 or 200 years. Nobody knows exactly these dates, but you might just consider first writing. We always think a civilization needs writing, and I agree with that. But then what is writing? Well, even the cave painters had signs, it's been found. There are, I think, 26 of them signs with all their various paintings in the caves, but they had no writing. And in order to have writing, you have to have form words and sentences. And then what that means is that you have to be able to organize the signs, and only if you have that kind of structured mind with an horizontal or vertical lines dominating your perception of reality, only with that will you be able to actually form the words and the sentences from whatever signs you're using. So that is a prerequisite for writing. And so that's the reason why civilization came like a package deal with all kinds of things at the same time, because they all emanate from that kind of shift in consciousness that people went through at this time. Okay, so then, this is just a first way of looking at how this was manifested in the history of humanity. And what you see here is the various peaks that we saw earlier in the long count, or which I sometimes also refer to as the 6th wave. And you can see that the dominant empires on our planet, at least in the old world, they emerge at the beginning of a peak. Then they often collapse at the end of a peak. And you may, for instance, you could say Persia, which is it's the empire that held the largest percentage of humanity, its population ever. And it was 42% of all human beings were in there. Now, so it really peaks and really becomes a center of civilization or empire, you might say. But then 355, shortly afterwards, then it goes down into a valley, and Alexander the Great, he crushes the Persian Empire, and it comes to an end. And then you can say the Roman Empire began, around the time of Christ, but then it collapses again like a Baktun later. Every peak or valley here is 144,000 days. And if you look at it like this, you will find that there is a rise and fall of civilizations, especially the dominating civilizations over time. And overall, you might say that the days then, they are creative. It's time to create a new empire when a new peak is beginning. And this is what you can see here. Now, you can't avoid seeing that we are, at least on this level, we are in the beginning of a valley. And what I should add to this is that none of these valleys, none of these dark ages that you might say, has actually brought the end of the world. And and how the different empires respond to the downturn is different. Some are actually transformed. You can say the Roman Empire went from, it collapsed. No longer did it have an emperor with its generals and military center of the known world at the time, but it turned into a center for Christianity. With the papacy in Rome and so forth. And that became the center of the new dark ages. And I'm saying this just to point out, it doesn't mean the end, but it does mean that something need to be, well, apparently in this pattern, things are transformed when you go into one of these dark ages. And we are at such a point now, at least when it comes to the sixth wave. And it may collapse, but it may also be transformed into something else. And that's what we will have to hope for. And I think it depends very much to what extent people understand the processes that are involved here and what they are producing. Yeah, okay. So I should try to come to our present time. And we were then looking at the sixth wave there, but then over time, then new waves are added. And you could call it waves or cycles. It depends. I think it's clearer to show that it's a wave. A cycle, it tends to lead people to think of it like astronomical cycles. But the real heart of the Mayan calendar is that it is a non-astronomical calendar. It's the only major culture on a planet that did not base their calendar on astronomy. They were interested in astronomy, yes, but the calendar is not based on astronomy. There's no 260-day astronomical cycle as there is in the sacred calendar, or these shift points here. They don't connect to astronomical cycles. That's a very important message I want to get through with. The Mayan calendar is the only non-astronomical calendar. It is based instead on the evolution of consciousness. And there we go. Okay, but you could also say that this is a cycle of life and death, or rebirth, or so forth. But I think if you want to follow a timeline and see how these cycles manifested over time, I think it is the best way of presenting it is like this, as a kind of a wave form. And what's happening now? I can't move forward what's happening? Okay. So anyway, the next step, from I should also mention that this sixth wave you see there, 3115 BC, it's not just what in my view is a good thing, so to speak. Yes, it did create civilizations, and it created all kinds of human creativity that's very honorable, very beautiful, and also made life easier in certain ways. You know, it's obvious. It's the whole process starts with the Egyptian pyramids, and the way to look at history in this perspective is that we're all part of one and the same process. One and the same process, and it goes back to the earliest time when the first real civilization emerged in Egypt. But then the yin-yang duality is very much critical for this new creativity that came with it. But it also creates oh, sorry. Okay, good morning. I'm on a call. Sorry about that. But what I was going to say is that the yin-yang polarity, and if people project that onto others, it means that it creates inequality. So some people are looked upon as good in the light, others are looked upon as dark in the darkness. And this is really what made most of these 5,000 years of patriarchal rule into a very brutal time with immense amounts of warfare, torture, and all that kind of a thing. And we don't find that. You don't really find any warfare on a large scale before 5,000 years ago. But that's when it first appears. So that's something to keep in mind, because we're all carrying we're adding these different states of consciousness to create a personal state of consciousness, and meaning that some people are still very much into that dominance state of consciousness that actually the sixth wave was creating. Okay, but then on top of that comes a new wave, and it has, as you can see, a 20-fold increased frequency, and then it creates an interference pattern, the two waves interacting to produce a unified whole, you might say. And that's another time of a big shift in the human mind. It's here you can see the shift there from one state of consciousness to that endarkened state of consciousness. I wouldn't say that, you know, the endarkenment means evil. That's not what I'm saying. But I do mean that the duality of the mind that ruled on the sixth wave created inequality, and also people thinking that there was a divine reason for their dominance and so forth. So anyway, the seventh wave endarkenment means, however, that people do not, to the same extent, make contact with the divine source that from whom the different states of consciousness emanated. And what happened with this shift is a little bit different from the shift that I talked about earlier. Here, then, people became focused on not on spirituality or religions or the divine or anything like that. They became interested in the material reality, material values of life, and started to build industries simply. And the steam engine is usually then set as the beginning of this industrial revolution. But there were many other things coming at the same time. The first iron works on any kind of a scale, and actually almost simultaneously also came people who were starting to fly in balloons, and people were starting to make steam cars, even as primitive as they were. But it just shows how the shift in consciousness changed the aspirations of the human beings. And it also, as I mentioned, there was the sixth wave created inequality, and it was typically ruled by a monarch or an emperor or something like that. And then the rest of the people were usually slaves or petty peasants or so forth. And that started to come to an end with the seventh wave, because the duality no longer dominated the minds of people. And so this has been a time through, step by step, at the peaks, at this higher wave, as you can see, people have more and more distanced themselves from those kind of inequalities, and created republics and democracies rather than autocratic empires or monarchies. So that's a product of a shift in consciousness. And you might say then there is also a change in the slave trade starts to be questioned for the first time. Before the beginning of this wave, nobody questioned the slave trade, and then it began to be questioned around 1750s, and then things have changed. I think the last major country to abolish slavery was Brazil, 1880, I think. But anyway, it's sort of this, what I'm showing here is just some events that starts the initial process. In other words, you can see the first peak there. That's what the Maya would say would ruled by the god of procreation. That's the time when the seeds are set. And that's here we see a bunch of seeds. And it's the same thing when it comes to the relationship between the genders. For instance, there were two major revolutions at the time that set an end to monarchies. One was the American Revolution, the second one was the French Revolution. Especially in the French Revolution, we may notice then that what really brought the downfall of the French monarchy was something called the Women's March of Versailles, where they forced the monarchic couple to move into Paris, where they later also were executed. But then the point is that it was also the beginning point of a start to be balance in the relationships between the genders that had not existed before. So, and also, part of this is that this kind of structuring of nations that the sixth wave was bringing is going out, and on top of the nations now start to appear a global context. We still belong to nations even today, but we are belonging to nations within the context of the whole planet. And so in a sense there is an expansion of the mind of the human beings taking place here, going to a wider perception of reality, where we are aware that whatever happens on any place in the planet will have some influence on us. Okay, so now we're coming much closer to today, and then just discussing this development of democracy in the seventh wave. And what you can see here then is that the peaks have been marked by significant events in the history of the planet when it comes to development of democracy and republics, you might say. And something that most listeners probably were aware of was the one that comes with a seventh peak there, 1992. You know, that was the time where we lived through it, and that was the time of the, you know, the liberation in a sense from of Eastern Europe, the fall of Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of apartheid, the end of a lot of dictatorships in Latin America, and many other things like that actually happened in that when the seventh peak began. And basically, that's been like that for some time. But as you can see, 2011, this wave, it actually turns into a valley. And so what we have seen in the world today, not the least in the United States, is a return to, which is, it comes in a sense with the territory that people will be more looking for, they certainly have become more nationalistic, but also more importantly, looking for dictators or autocracy. And this will actually last until 2031, as you can see there. And so if you ask me, there will still be a very, very difficult time these 7 years ahead on a political level in terms of defending democracy and freedom, really. But then, you know, I do expect, based on this pattern, and the pattern is quite clear, I would say, that well, to illustrate how clear the pattern is, I have not placed out the beginning there of the fifth night, which is 1932. But basically, you know, you have that valley starting here in 1932, and that's the time when Hitler takes dictatorial power in Germany, and then that whole valley is about fascism in Europe and the World War II, and then comes the atomic bombs, and that whole era doesn't end until Stalin dies in 1953. So that particular time period was defined by the ancient Mesoamericans as ruled by the Lord of Darkness. But the current time is also like that, and it will be like that for until 2031. And then I think freedom and democracy will again have wind on its back. And yeah, so this is just repeating that to show the timing of these events. And I certainly think that it's appropriate to look upon the election in the presidential election in the United States in this context. Okay. Well, I should not only talk about I have probably 100 different waves where you can track evolutionary process, but I've been talking now, trying to give you a sense of how the Mayan calendar describes say religions and technology and democracy or system of governance and so forth. To take a little bit lighter look at it, you know, you can see here how closely the various most popular ways of for dance music also follow this pattern. And so you can see the waltz with this very slow rhythm in the first half of the process. And in the second half, you have sort of on schedule coming jazz music, rock and roll, techno music, increasing the speed with which the frequency of the rhythms. And this then is ultimately, it shows that it's not just our minds that are influenced by these various waves. It shows that our rhythms, our whole bodies, in a sense, and are seeking to somehow express the change in rhythm, in frequency that these waves are bringing. So, but then I said, it's really that every new wave creates a new phenomenon, and they are added to each other. And so, the eighth wave started in 1999, and this is really then when you can say that internet becomes interactive. People are starting to use smart technologies. And this is the beginning. The eighth wave then is really the beginning of what now is talked about very much as the artificial intelligence. And it really comes down, even those technologies are very much related to the states of consciousness that we, unbeknownst to ourselves, mostly are downloading from the cosmic center. You might say that the digitalization of our reality, which has changed the world, has created a new world. Really, everything happens in this computerized reality. You might say, and you might say that it's a return to the duality. Certainly, it's a return to economic inequality on a very large scale, but it's also then, you might say, light is one and darkness is zero, and that's the basic structure of all computers, binary mathematics, and that comes through this. And even if just a few of us actually are working with developing algorithms and so forth, we have all downloaded or have had as a possibility to download this new state of consciousness, which sort of makes us part of a new world, as I talked about earlier. So this shift then goes back to duality, but it goes back to a duality that's dominated by the right brain half, and where the light comes from the right brain half. And this wave, which is on top of the seventh wave that I just talked about, it brings the digital revolution. It certainly has changed the relationships enormously between the genders, and that has to do with the fact that it's the right brain half that gets the light now, and that has increased the role of women in all walks of life, you might say. And it has led to return of spirituality or neo-shamanism or so forth. But also a separation of the individual, and that's one of the most worrisome, I would say, consequences of this whole digital revolution. Even if on another level it sort of facilitates contacts between individuals all over the world. And so these are things coming with the eighth wave. And what this also means is that the return of the light has to this in the past 20 years or so has created a lot of new healing techniques, and which may prepare us for the climb to the highest level of the ninth wave. And I will not go into that, but we should be aware, I think, that we will need to make a quantum leap to make it to the top of, and that may require some effort. You know, you might say that the Egyptians a long time ago, when the sixth wave gave them the new state of consciousness, they had to make a real effort to sort of manifest this new state of consciousness, and did so by building the pyramids and cities and so forth that they did. But then that took an effort, even if they probably did it enthusiastically. And that's probably the case also for us. The ninth wave, which is the top level of the pyramid, or the Mayan pyramid, it doesn't bring any new technology. It's, you know, if anything, it's the same looking, the same state of consciousness as the cave painters did, except that now we have incorporated in ourselves a bunch of different lower levels. But then the fact that then this is it's not a dualistic state of consciousness, and meaning that you won't project that kind of duality onto yourself or onto others. It's not a judgmental state of consciousness. It's a loving state of consciousness, one that seeks to remove the traumas or help us transcend the traumas, maybe is the best word, and create a more peaceful and loving human beings. I would also think, and I think that's part of all the discussions, that it's about transsexual genders and so forth, that it's a more androgynous. It doesn't separate in the way that it has been, and it doesn't create a new technological revolution. It's rather there in order for everything to sort of be capped off, to be balanced, rebalanced, to the extent that we're able to develop ourselves in resonance with the ninth wave. We will also at the same time be able to balance in ourselves all the various aspects that may be off, so to speak, created by the lower waves. You know, the lower waves essentially have been very much about dominance, and much of human traumas actually originates from somebody trying to exert dominance over others. And then that is the nature of trauma, I think. And but then the ninth wave, which has that, which we can already at this point we can download, and especially if we are aware of it, and especially if we cultivate it and intend to have that happen, we will be able to create a more lasting balancing of humanity that I think mostly will manifest around the year 2031. And don't take that as some kind of as people were talking about 2012 in the past, which very often without any knowledge about what it's about. But still, you know, I would say that 2031 is still a time, after some rough times that I think is up, that we will be able to create a better world. The reason being not only that the seventh wave will come back with the peak, bringing freedom and democracy return, but also that in 2031, people that were born when the ninth wave was activated and have been sort of had that access possible from birth, which most of us have not, they will be then coming of age in 2031 and will start to be able to shape our reality in a way that they haven't done up until now. But anyway, of course, all of these, you know, I have courses where I talk about all of these various waves and all of what they bring. But this is probably the essential scheme that's good to know. And well, I mentioned also, or should mention that there, people say, you hear some people say nothing happened in 2012. Well, first of all, that was a miscalculation. It was 2011, as I said all the time before this time. But what happened in 2011 then, when the ninth wave was activated? Well, you see some examples of it. To the right, the picture is from Cairo, and which at that time, was Arab Spring. And people in Cairo and Damascus at that time, they just chanted 111. It may sound hard to believe because we have shifted down also into this valley that I talked about earlier. But at the time, that was the experience people had. That doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or Coptic or some other Druid sect or what they're called. It was a unity that was really expressed. And another movement at that time in 2011, after the ninth wave was activated, was the Occupy movement, which, did certainly object to the vast inequalities that exist on our planet, but also made politics into something else than just sort of fighting the other side, and rather trying to come up with holistic solutions. And so the picture at the bottom there I have is a bunch of different protests, movements that happened in this year. And these movements were strong enough that at the end of 2011, Time magazine decided to not as usual appoint somebody to be the person of the year, but then actually become the protester of the year, became the honored person on the Time magazine. And it tells us something about, yes, there was a tremendous shift, and people did look for unity very much strongly so in the year 2011, when the ninth wave had been activated. And now it continues, but it's been a more complex story with the valleys that we are in, and that took an end, that shift sort of took an end to this desire for unity that people had. But that desire for unity may very well come back. And I believe so for most of us, the good thing is to really set our attention as to what kind of a world we want, and also to prepare ourselves, and maybe even prepare the next generation, the ones that are, as I said, are coming of age in 2031, to actually have this develop into a better world. And so this is something I show you if you're interested in sort of following how does the ninth wave influence your life? Well, here you have the address there, and you can actually then follow. Here you see the days and the peaks where we are. A day is only 13 days, and night is only 13 days as well. So you can follow and see what kind of effects it has. In my own experience, when there is a day, I feel that whatever I do in order to serve the oneness, so to speak, will get wind on the back. Whereas in the periods that are valleys, things from the past, you might say, my past or the past of humanity or so forth, are again turning up to be dealt with in a certain sense. So this is how I experience this particular wave, up and down. These are two friends of mine, Don Alejandro Ochla, to the left. He used to be, at least he's now 95 years old, and his wife Elizabeth Araujo. and I took this picture in India actually because I had invited him to be interviewed there, and I think this is really the first time anybody interviewed the Mayan elders themselves, for them to be able to communicate how they look upon their calendar system. I'm not saying that they are the same as mine. That would hardly be possible. But I certainly have promoted their promoted their knowledge and value their respect as well, I must say. And oops, and this is me getting it's an Olmec elder who gives me a staff of authority at a ceremony. And these are my most recent books, 4 most recent books, and I'm starting a new course on July 27th, more broadly in the 6-week course about the Mayan calendar. And I think I should end there, and I thank you for your attention. And
Well, thank you, Carl. We're about out of time, so I am a little bit in a quandary because I would love to have asked you a number of questions. There was also questions in the chat that are worth contemplating. One quick question before we break to the after chat, and that is, what cosmic event were the Mayans using for sort of day one, a billion or 2 years ago? What was the ignition moment, and how did they arrive at that? Because everything that you're saying depends on when the cycle started.
Yeah. Well, no, not really. I mean, first of all, the answer is I don't know what event they did, but there is a mathematical structure that links it to the beginning of the 6th day, the long count, 3115 BCE, and that I described in the talk, what they believed happened. It was a shift in the tree of life, and an 8 partitioning emanated. And then you can use that date actually to back calculate to the beginning of time. But you have
what? One of the dates in the calendar, and then you can retrospectively look back, and then that allows you to calculate moving forward.
Right.
Gotcha. And then another question that was coming to my mind in relation, for example, to what the Aboriginals believe in Australia and many indigenous people around the world, that we have been in cycles of destruction and reemergence. Like, for example, 12,800 years ago or so, there was this great flood and everything was kind of wiped out. And then you kind of start again, and that we've had cycles of it. But your chronology shows one sort of linear progression that goes from 1 billion years ago to the end of the 9 waves, without these cyclic patterns that many of the indigenous people observe. How do you understand that?
Well, I first of all, I certainly also describe patterns of evolution and destruction. I mean, that's the whole essence of it. It's just that, in my view, and that's sort of the Mayan calendar system, it's not physically based. And when you hear I don't even know if I believe that that ancient other peoples talked about 12,000 years. I know a lot of New Age researchers talk about that kind of a time, but they are basing it on a physical thing, basically the Newtonian physics, like astronomical cycles, like the precessional cycles of the Earth. And I think that's completely wrong, simply. It doesn't fit the data as to what we know about when civilizations have gone up and down and so forth.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. There was lots of other questions, including your sense of why the Mayans sacrificed people and many other questions, but maybe we'll deal with those in the after chat.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And what shall I do just to get to the after?
Well, you'll see the link in the chat box that Stan just put in the chat, and then you received the link in your Zoom invite. So if you can call up.
Here, you can join the after. Yes.
That's right. So you
and I leave and join. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. You just heard that we're going to have Carl in the after chat. You'll see the link that Stan just put in the chat box, and you all received it in your Zoom reminder for today's program. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you back for Humanity Rising on Monday. Thanks so much. Bye for now.